Perfect. And we're live. All right. Welcome everyone to this 9x live workshop on Claude Code for beginners. Very excited about. We did run this session a couple of weeks ago, obviously for our usual time slot, which was more the European and American audience. I'm down in Australia for the next few weeks, so seeing out how this time zone goes. But yeah, it was a very, very good session last time, and I've made a few tweaks to it, so hopefully it should be a good one as well. For those of you who haven't yet, maybe there's a few people that signed up quite late and didn't receive the email that I sent, like let's say yesterday Australian time or early morning if you're in the US. Please make sure you check out the workshop preparation guide. I will be um, pulling this one up live during the session as well. But there are a few things you will need to install if you want to build the last session, the last part of this workshop will be a live build that we do together. So if you do want to build live, please make sure you check out this link, go9x.me. I can drop it here in the chat as well. go9x.me/cc101. And there's just a few things you need to install so you can get this up and running. Awesome. So what have we got in store today? I'll give a quick introduction, then we're going to cover the basics of what Claude Code actually is and maybe some of the main use cases. We'll then set up Claude Code together from scratch. And then I will show you, first of all, a beginner workflow for Claude Code because there's many different ways to actually use it. So this one, the first part will really be watching me do a complete workflow from start to finish. And then obviously we'll finish up with a live build all together. Awesome. So a quick introduction for those of you who don't know us yet. We are 9x. You can find us at go9x.com. We're building your one-stop shop to learn AI and automation because we believe that AI and automation are the most important skills that you can learn right now as a business professional. And it is our mission to deliver these skills to you on a silver platter. And we do this in a few different ways. First of all, with our YouTube channel. So we every week publish new videos, the latest AI and automation news, tutorials, and also tool demos. So make sure to check that one out. I will drop a few links in the chat in a second. On top of our YouTube channel, we also have these live workshops like the one you are all in right now. We run these every single week. And next week's session will be, let's say, maybe building on top of this one. Some very, very similar use cases between Claude Code and the very, very popular tool at the moment that's blowing up. And if any of you saw saw the news this week, was actually acquired by OpenAI, and that is OpenClaw. So we'll be running an OpenClaw for beginners workshop next week. There's a lot of like mixed feelings about it. There's a lot of hype around it. People saying it's the best tool ever, and that AGI is basically here. And there's a lot of others rightfully pointing out that there's a lot of security concerns that you need to be aware of about this tool. And I'll do my best to try and cover both of those aspects. And we'll be running it at the exact same time as this one. So it'll be the exact same time next week. So especially for the Australians, or if you're in the APAC region, it's a good opportunity if you missed the one we ran a few weeks ago. So on top of our YouTube channel and our live workshops, we also have our courses. These are structured to really take you from beginner to advanced, starting with the AI Starter, which is really an intro to show you what's possible with AI as a business professional, going all the way up to our most advanced program, the AI Builder, where you can learn to automate with AI by building powerful AI automations and AI agents. So let me drop a few of those links in the chat if you want to check any of those out. And then with the shameless plugs out the way, we can get into the workshop. And let's just want to touch on the objectives of today. So by the end of this 90-minute sessions, what I want all of you to leave with is, first of all, understand what Claude Code is and when you should use it. Also that you have Claude Code up and running on your machine, very important, and that you build your first automation in Claude Code. So that's what we'll all do together. As I said before throughout the session, please feel free to drop your questions in the chat. I'm running this one solo today. Normally we do have others in the 9x team here. I will do my best and I will try and actively take some moments to pause and take a look at the chat. Like sign up. Okay, enough. Yeah, thank you so much, Nina, for sharing the link as well for the workshop prep Perfect. All right, so let's get underway. First thing that I need to point out, we communicated this as well in the event that Claude Code is a paid feature. Maybe one day in the future they will make this free, but especially if you want to try it live, this is something that you will need to have an account for. There's a couple of different options in terms of running this and using the paid feature. So the best option, in my opinion, is the getting and using your Claude AI subscription. So that's as little as $20 a month, which it is billed monthly. Obviously, they say here $17, but that's if you're on a yearly plan. So the Pro plan will already give you access to Claude Code, but you also have the API option. So you could, in the Anthropic developer console, create an API key that you connect with. The thing here is it starts as little as $5, so maybe it's good for testing. However, this is usage-based pricing, so you pay as you use it. You'll see these agentic coding tools tend to chew up tokens quite quickly, so I would strongly recommend getting a fixed monthly plan, because then you don't need to worry about any sort of credits being consumed too fast and you running out of credits. So the fixed monthly plan, I think, is the good option for beginners. Just see here a question in the chat. All good. All right, so that was just a little public service announcement. Let me see if I can control my presentation here. Here we go. All right, so now let's quickly touch on Claude Code 101. What is Claude Code? This is one of the official descriptions from Anthropic, an agentic coding tool that lives in your terminal and helps you turn ideas into code faster than ever before. So very developer focused. I just want to zoom in a little bit on this agentic coding tool. What exactly does it mean? When we have a look at agentic coding, it really contains two parts. Obviously, the first one, coding, it means that it writes and fixes code, and then also agentic. And this part is about meaning that it has agency. You just need to give it a task, and it will basically figure out the steps it needs to do to complete that task and iterate until it's done. So there's obviously the real hype around AI agents that we saw last year. And with Claude Code, it's bringing this agency, this agentic behavior into the world of coding, an agentic coding tool. Now, the core capabilities of Claude Code, in order for Anthropic, what they realized, in order to create a tool that developers would actually use, they needed to equip Claude Code with 4 core capabilities. And this is a question that I often get asked. And this is also for a beginner session in terms of, okay, but how is Claude Code different to using ChatGPT or the standard Claude app? So hopefully these core capabilities might make that a little bit clearer. First of all, it can actually work on files on your machine. And this is something that's obviously critical for engineers, that they're often writing files in HTML, in Python, in JavaScript. They create files to run their software. But what's great here is it can also not only limited to working with files that developers use, like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Python, but it can also work with files that regular business people use, be it PDFs, spreadsheets, and documents. So it can literally work on files on your computer. Then second to that, it can actually run programs on your computer. And this is obviously critical for developers, for an agentic coding tool to be able to do, because developers often need to install different libraries on their machine. Just like I asked you in the pre-workshop prep to install Node.js and Python, actually you could also ask Claude Code to do that for you. It can literally run programs on your computer. This is obviously important when you're building software, because you want to build an app and then you also need to be able to run that app. Next up, it can check its own work. So there's actually a feedback loop built in to Claude Code, where before it will go and give you straight away an answer, and especially if it's generating some code, it will actually try and see if that code runs, especially if we're making like API calls. If it receives an error back, it doesn't just answer you straight away saying, sorry, I failed and I hit an error. It will actually read that error, update its script, and try again. And this is very, very important for an agentic coding tool. And then finally, it can split big tasks across sub-agents. And I don't know if some of you have tried this before, maybe in ChatGPT or Claude or whatever app you're using, that sometimes you might upload, let's say, 50 PDF files that you want it to process, and it ends up really getting stuck because that's way too much context for it to process. What's great with Claude Code, it can take a task like that saying, hey, you want me to analyze 50 PDFs, and it will actually spin up little sub agents that maybe only look at 5 PDFs at a time, and then it's able to accomplish that task. Obviously, in the world of coding, this is very, very important since we're dealing with large coding bases. Now, I see a few questions pop up in the chat. Let me just have a look. We talk about the MD file for Claude Code. Yep, we'll be covering that one as well, so no worries about that. So MD is a markdown file. I will be covering that one as well. Perfect. Can we use Cursor instead of Visual Studio Code today? Yes, absolutely, Amy, you can. Okay. Then, so with these four core capabilities, hopefully that makes it a little bit clear about like why this is different to using the standard AI chat applications. This opens up four main use cases, and this is the four main use cases according to Anthropic. So on their website, in their Claude Code documentation, they say that this excels at four main activities. Number one, building features from description. So you can tell Claude Code what you want in plain English. It'll make a plan, write the code, and then ensure it works. So you'll see some of those capabilities that I just mentioned at work there. Next, debugging and fixing issues. So you can describe a bug or paste an error message. Claude analyzes your code base and implements a fix. Navigate any code base, ask anything about your team's code base and get thoughtful answers with full project awareness. And then finally, automate tedious tasks. So use it for any repetitive business workflow. That can be organizing files, processing spreadsheets, generating documents, moving data between tools, or updating records across systems. You name it. Pretty much any business process you do working at a computer, we're getting very, very close to being able to do that in Claude Code. Now, if you look at these four use cases, it's quite clear that the first three here are really for proper software development. They're very developer focused. So I've put here dev use cases. But this last one, automate tedious tasks, this really applies to any business professional. And I think that's one of the main reasons why this tool is becoming more and more popular and more people are actually jumping on it. So I'm very excited that we've got now 175 people learning this together live. And this part is what we're going to focus on today, because this is really a session, a workshop for beginners. And I think a lot more beginners maybe don't have an app that they want to build straight away, but also some of the workflows that I show you, you'll be able to very quickly understand how you can also apply it to building full software. But we want to see how we can use Claude Code to automate our tedious tasks. So I want to give you an example of that one with automating a task that I was spending quite a lot of time on, and that was our 9x newsletter. And I'm using Claude Code now to help me with this. So to give you the context for any of you who maybe just signed up to this event for the first time and didn't receive any of our lovely newsletters before, every week I send out an email, and it pretty much includes two things. What's the next 9x Live workshop that we're having? So this was one of the emails we sent out last week. Upcoming 9x Live workshop and one of our latest YouTube videos from the channel. Now, I was already using AI quite a lot in this process, but the process pretty much involved around going to Luma, grabbing the event description, dropping that into the Claude chat and asking it, hey, this is the event description. Can you please write a newsletter summary of this to tell people about what they can expect in the live workshop? And the same, I would grab the transcript from the YouTube video, open up Claude, copy paste it in, saying, hey, here's our latest YouTube video, here's the transcript, write a quick summary that we can share via our newsletter. So I was still using AI, but it was still taking quite a little bit of time, sort of half an hour per workshop with this copy pasting and waiting. So now with Claude Code, I've got it up and running here in Visual Studio Code. If this is all looking a little bit scary, don't worry. In the setup, I'll be walking you through all of these step by step. But I have this little command here now where I can just simply type /newsletter, and then it's going to get to work. So it's already responded saying, I'll generate the weekly newsletter. Let me start by fetching the event and video data. So I've created this Claude Code skill that it knows how to generate the first draft of a newsletter. It's going to go out and pull the latest upcoming event. And you can see here, it's already detected that OpenClaw for Beginners workshop that we're running next week. And now it's saying, how would you like to handle this newsletter without a 9x Live? This is interesting. I think maybe because I tested this one before, or maybe it's missing the tag. I would say use the OpenClaw for Beginners. Let me just run that one. Okay, so now it knows it's going to include the OpenClaw for Beginners workshop for the newsletter. It also is going to grab the latest YouTube video. So let's see. Here we have the event pitch and we have the latest YouTube video. So what it did, it actually went to YouTube, grabbed the transcript. Now it looks like it's having some issues. I'm just going to say, so it looks like it's having some issues with the HTML. This is always the case in live sessions. I only just created this one before. Let me actually say, run it for the 9x live that I'm running today. One great thing with these using a tool like Claude Code for automating your work, you can see how quickly it can adapt. Because obviously, if you build a workflow in, let's say, N8N or Make, when there's some things happening in that process, and if something breaks, it's very hard to like adapt quickly. Let me just see if it's going to figure this one out. Still thinking. I'll just say run it without the image. That's fine. You guys will be able to get an idea of this, hopefully. Now it basically pulled in the event data, it pulled in the YouTube video. Now it's running a script that it created itself to actually generate this newsletter. So now let me generate the newsletter. I'll calculate the event times and create the HTML preview. And I'm seeing some questions in the chat. I'll take a look at those in a second. And what we should see happen here, so now it's drafting that newsletter. And what's really, really nice about this process, in a second, it should hopefully open this one up as well. And let me see if it's actually done that. And here we go. Yeah, so it actually opened up the newsletter. And so what it's done, it's pulled in our latest YouTube video, gives a quick summary. If I click here, watch now, we can see that goes directly to the right YouTube channel. We don't have to worry about broken links or incorrect links. Here, normally we would have an image for the Luma event. There was obviously an issue with pulling that one in today, but you can already see it's actually drafted the full newsletter section, including what you'll learn, and has those adjusted timestamps. This is already being able to save me a bunch of time in just having a quick first version done. Now I can obviously still make changes. I could take this and adjust it before bringing it into our email tool, or I could just basically chat through here with Claude Code and say, change this, also include this. Also, if there's another, like let's say a good LinkedIn post that we wanted to include in our newsletter, it would actually be able to adapt it along the way. So let me take a quick look at some of the questions here. Yes, Dante. So this newsletter is a skill, and we'll be covering that in terms of how to create these skills a little bit later on. So this is running Claude Code in Visual Studio Code, exactly. And Ashwin, can we get a recording of the webinar? Yes, absolutely. In terms of how Claude Code compares to Claudebot, maybe I'll leave that one to the end. We have a little bit of time for Q&A as well. And Valeria is asking, Claude Code cannot start working based on an external trigger, can it? You always have to be the one to start it. So there's a few different ways. How I'm going to show you today is, yes, you always need to be the one to start it. And I would really say that's the main intention of it, that you are creating these workflows for yourself. The example is for the newsletter. I always want to be in control when I have my time block is like, okay, this is the time where I'm working on my newsletter. I can just come in here and type /newsletter and get a result up very fast. I'm still in the driver's seat. And this is, I would say it's optimized towards those processes where there's always a human in the loop. And it's almost like a more improved ChatGPT app or Claude app, because it can connect to your different tools. It can pull in data and you can create these automations. Now, there are ways to actually have Claude Code generate some automations and have it running automatically. So there's like GitHub Actions is one way. You could even create some scripts and have Claude Code talk you through actually hosting that. It is a little bit more technical. What we're going to cover today is just us triggering Claude Code, but it is possible to automate this further. Awesome. So that was a quick demo. Let me just see. Perfect. Now let's get into setting up Claude Code. Obviously, I shared the instructions earlier. Here it is one more time. If you do not have this set up, I'm going to leave this on the screen for 1 minute. So make sure you're heading to this page and that you have all the links you need. And so Dante's asking, is it better to use Claude Code through an IDE like VS Code or through the Claude desktop app? We're going to answer that one in one second. All right. So one thing important to know before I walk you through the setup process. One of the reasons why I guess there's a lot of people maybe struggle with getting started with Claude Code is there's multiple ways to actually access this. It's not one thing. And depending on which YouTube tutorial you see or which documentation you're currently reading, you can really get confused because there's running Claude Code in the terminal. So for anyone who's, especially if you're not a software engineer, the terminal is something that developers often use. And you can also run Claude Code here, but this gets a little bit technical. It's also like all of these instructions need to be typed. This is quite a like let's say a lot of friction for a non-engineer to work in this interface. Let me just move my screens around here. Perfect. Then there's a code editor, the Visual Studio Code cursor, and then finally, there's the Claude desktop app. Now, all of these have their pros and cons. The terminal that I mentioned, this was the very first version of Claude Code, and the main intention of Claude Code in terms of how it's built is as this terminal app that engineers are using. This has the most complete feature set. It is by far the most advanced. However, it is the most technical. And also here, one issue that you see is when you're working here in the terminal, you won't actually be able to see the different files that it's creating, which we'll see in a second what that's like in the code editor. Then the code editor extension has most of the features of the terminal and is very, very beginner friendly, which I hope we'll all see. Then there's obviously the Claude desktop app. This is by far the easiest to start with. So you can install the Claude desktop app, open it up, and there is also a Claude Code section. However, it is also very, very limited in terms of its features. It is in beta. I expect it over time to get more and more of the features that we see in the code editor and maybe eventually also the terminal. So in my opinion, for beginners, what we're going to be using today is Visual Studio Code. But as I mentioned, like also some of the workflows that I show you will be able to use across all of them. For me, this is just the sweet spot in terms of it has the most features, plus it's also very, very beginner friendly. Let me have a look here in the chat. Okay, Melda, you've got an error code when I try to open Claude Code in Visual Studio. Let me show you the process, and then I'll see if you still have an issue there. Same exact thing everyone else besides the desktop. Yes, you will get a recording after the session. Yeah, so I think you're trying to use the terminal, Imelda, which is not the right way. We'll show you that one in a second. On top, just to even add to this confusion, so there's three different ways where you can access Claude Code, and there's also two different modes, let's say. There's a local mode which can run local files. You have access to running on GitHub repositories. It can make API calls. However, since it runs on your computer and it can run programs on your computer, write and create files, read files, there is a little bit of a security risk there. Now it's funny doing this session after doing an OpenClaw session, which has even more security risk. Claude Code seems quite safe in comparison, but that still is important that this is giving an AI access to run on your computer. Then there is also cloud mode. So with cloud mode, you can't write local files. It is a little bit more secure, but any API calls, so connecting to the different tools, are typically blocked. This one is really just to be used for developers who are working on GitHub projects, I would say. So in our case, what we're going to be using today is a business professional, the beginner getting started, we are going to be using the local mode. So now let me just go and set this one up from scratch so we can see this. So I'm just going to open up Visual Studio Code. I might open up a new window here. Just going to open up a new window. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to uninstall this so we can see the process from scratch again. So this is what I covered. If you open up Visual Studio Code for the first time, what you might see is probably something like this, that you have a chat open up on the left side. You maybe have some folders here. This looks obviously very, very daunting as a non-coder business professional, this is what's known as a code editor. So what you can basically do is work on a coding project. On the left-hand side, we'll see the different files that you have access to. And now Visual Studio Code and more of these code editing tools like Cursor have their own built-in agents. We don't want to use this. What we want to use is actually our Claude Code. So to access this in Visual Studio Code, we don't want to go, so one mistake, or like, it's not a mistake, but if you open up the terminal here and try and type in Claude, this one probably won't work for you. What we want to do is we want to head to the extensions marketplace, and I'm going to look for Claude Code. And we can see there are a bunch of extensions with Claude Code in the name. Be very, very careful here. What you want to install is the official one from Anthropic. It should be at the top of the list, but make sure it's coming from Anthropic. 4-star rating, has more than 4.5 million installations. And then all you need to simply do is hit install. Yeah, when you install that one, I'm actually going to close this chat here on the right-hand side. You'll notice there's this little Claude symbol appearing here. If you open that one up, that one's going to open up Claude Code. Another way of doing this, if I close this one, here on the right-hand side, we have this toggle, and this is like a toggle for the chat in Visual Studio Code. What you can also do, if you right-click on this chat, you would be able to now enable Claude Code. So in my case, I'll untick it. But if I right click here, I should see Claude Code, and you can tick that one. And now you also have access to it here, and you can just basically toggle it on and off. You just want to check the chat if there's any issues in installing that one. Imelda, did that help your process? And Jason, are you using the extension like I just showed on the right-hand side, the Claude Code for VS Code? Yes, LB, you should be sharing your screen. Okay, so if that is the case, that on Windows it requires this additional, like let's say file, what I would do, I would trust it and just click on that link and download and install that file. So I'm a Mac user, unfortunately, I don't have, couldn't test this one on Windows. So I would recommend for Windows then just following that link, the git scm, and downloading that git bash. Awesome. All right. So once you have the extension opened up here on the right-hand side, what you probably won't see is this. You will most likely see this screen here where you need to log in with your Claude Code account. As I mentioned here, there's a couple of different options. You can use your Claude Code subscription, or you can use your API key via the Anthropic console. I highly recommend the Claude Code subscription. So you can just click this button. A window will pop up where you can log into your Anthropic account, but you will need to have a paid plan. Maybe can I just get some thumbs up in the chat or on the using the reactions feature, how many people were able to add the Visual Studio Code extension and get it working? Anyone? Eric's got it working. Ray works, awesome. Yeah, perfect. So I'm seeing there are some people having some issues. Unfortunately, I can't debug all of these live. So what I would recommend, I'm going to like analyze, like I'll check out the chat afterwards, and I can maybe even also send a follow-up. In your case, just watch the process. But since we do have a bunch of people with this up and running, I'm going to keep going. What I would recommend, still follow along, and it should give you a lot of inspiration in terms of how to use this. I think there's just a couple of things you need to install on your machine, and you should be good to go. All right, so let me just open this one and close it again. I might even just open a new window here and Claude Code. Perfect. All right. Then let's move on. What I want to show you now is a beginner Claude Code workflow. Right now, this is still me showing you a process. It's not something that you should follow along with right now because it involves connecting with an external tool and API keys. What the plan is now, follow along 10, 15 minutes of me going through a whole workflow, and then we'll do a live build all together. And the reason why I want to point this out, so this was actually a tweet from the creator of Claude Code. And what he very appropriately pointed out, saying there is no one correct way to use Claude Code. And even every single person on the Claude Code team at Anthropic uses it very differently. So what I'm about to show you is what I believe to be the best process or the best workflow for a beginner to get started. This is not the ultimate Claude Code workflow. This isn't involving any crazy Ralph loops or anything like that. This is just how you as a non-technical person can get started using this tool and seeing its capabilities. So what I'm going to be building out for you live now is an invoice generator agent. And what I want you to do is just put yourself in the situation. Let me again just move my tabs around here, that maybe you're working in the finance department, or maybe you're a freelance small business owner and you run your own invoicing. A lot of people are still doing this in tools like Airtable, Google Sheets, and then creating the invoices in Google Docs as a PDF manually. And this is a perfect use case of a tedious task that we can automate. So here I have an Airtable base set up with some invoice data. So I have an invoices table with the invoices that I need to send out. And we have a status, we have them in draft, and when we're ready to create them, we just change this to create. And we have here some line items. So each invoice has several, like 3, 4, 5 line items of like, let's say, bills that we need to put on this invoice. And as I said, this would be something you'd be manually doing in like a Google Sheets template and then downloading as PDF and sending out. So what I'm going to do in Claude Code, my beginner workflow, I'll walk you through this like step by step, the full process, and then start doing each of these. So we'll start Claude Code in plan mode, and I'll show you exactly how to do that in a second. And then very important, what I'm going to tell Claude Code to do is I want to tell it the task I want it to do and not the automation that it should build. And what I mean by that is, rather than prompting something like create an automation that reads the CSV of invoices and generates a PDF invoice for each customer, then saves them in invoices folder with a certain naming convention, just ask Claude Code saying, hey, here's a bunch of CSV of invoices I need to send. Can you generate an invoice PDF for each row? Just tell it the task you want it to do. Don't tell it like, I want you to do this in this certain language, or I need you to do an automation that runs every day. Just get Claude Code to do the process once from scratch. Once we get it to do the process once from scratch, Claude Code is going to come up with a plan, because we're in plan mode. Review the plan carefully and give feedback, execute the plan, test and iterate on Claude's output. And finally, we're going to be creating a reusable skill. So let me show you what this looks like in practice. As I said, this is just me doing this now for you to watch along. This is not something you should be following along with live. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to VS Code. And here I am with just it open. I don't have any sort of folder open. What we want to do is always click on open, and I'm going to create a new folder. So I'm just going to go to my projects folder, and I actually created one earlier, but let me just create a new one here. I'm just going to call this one Claude Code Invoice Agent. And every folder that we create, so we just start by creating a blank folder, and this is going to be the folder where Claude Code will build out this workflow or this project. So I'm going to open this one up. Once you open this one up, we see the folder here on the left-hand side, but it's completely empty. There's no files in there whatsoever. And then I'm going to go over to Claude Code. I'm in a new conversation, and right down here at the bottom, you see it says ask before edits. I'm just going to click on this one once and then twice, and now we're in this plan mode, and it has the pause symbol. So you can either click here, or another way you can do it is by pressing Shift and Tab and also move between them. So we want to make sure that we're in plan mode, and you'll see the reason why in a second. And now I have just a simple prompt here. And as I said, I want to describe the task, not the automation. And in my case, this is the task. Hey, I have an Airtable base with invoice data, an invoice table, and a linked line items table. For each invoice where the status is create, could you please generate an HTML invoice, export it as PDF, and then upload it back to Airtable. When that's done, update the status to ready to send. So let me give off this task to Claude Code. And what's actually happening now, so it's going a little bit rogue here. What I might need to do, just 1 second, I'm going to actually stop this one because it's very, very clever here, and it actually found a skill that it created in a previous session. So this will be very unimpressive. I actually want to create this skill again. So what I'm quickly going to do in my other screen here is just go and delete that skill. Let me move this over, and then we can get a good demo in. So I need to go to my user. So where did it find it? Users, corner, and Claude. And then skills, create invoices. Okay, that one's done. Let me just open up a new session here. And so I'm just going to do a new conversation. And let me do the exact same prompt, making sure that I'm in plan mode. And hopefully we get the demo that we want to show. Okay, so Claude's saying, I'll help you build an automated invoice generation workflow. The very first thing what it's going to do is it's going to explore the code base. Obviously, there is absolutely nothing in this code base. I'm going to allow all. Often what you'll get are these permission requests. So Claude Code is asking, hey, I want to do something on your computer now. Am I able to do this? So this is this extra level of security that's put in place. Now, what I would recommend, especially like so that you don't need to be there the whole time saying yes, yes, and yes, depending on what it's asking you, I'm going to say this second one, allow always for this session. Now, what it's giving us here are two things. It's giving us the actual terminal command that it wants to run. So bash commands are like text versions of how we can do things on a computer. So there's a text command to create a new file, to find a file, to delete a file. But what it's always going to do is it's going to give you in plain English what it actually wants to do. So what I want to do is find key configuration and source files in the project. In the project basically means in the folder that we're currently working on. I'm going to say yes, allow for the whole session. So the first thing it's doing is like saying, hey, are we already working with something? Because what happens is whenever Claude Code starts a new session, even if we had folders here, it doesn't actually have context about what's there. And so it will do this search to get started. It keeps asking, could you do this invoice task in Claude Cowork? Yes and no. In Claude Cowork, you'll be able to run this locally. You wouldn't be able to actually integrate with Airtable that I'll be showing you in a second. Or let's say it will be a lot harder than in Claude Code. Okay, so now it's actually getting very, very, I'm just going to say only look at files in this folder, no others. That's the problem of when you run demos too many times. It actually went and found another version of this file on my computer that ran this exact thing. So you can see how resourceful it is. Okay, now here we get to what we actually want to do. So when we're in plan mode, what's going to happen is Claude is going to ask you a few questions to help you out through this process, because I just gave it a very quick description of the task. And if you haven't provided this context, that's what's really great about plan mode. It's going to ask them. So it says, what fields exist in your Airtable invoice table? This is something that it will typically do a lot. I'll say, hey, I've got some data in Airtable. Can you go and connect to it? It's asking me to either share a screenshot of my Airtable base or actually write out here the different field names. I don't want to do that. I'm going to select other, and I'm going to say, I'll give you API access, discover the fields yourself. In a second, what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect Claude Code to Airtable. And rather than me telling it all of the fields and like wasting time copy pasting or even sharing a screenshot, I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to give you access to my Airtable. You go and figure it out yourself. So I can always choose other here. And it's like, do you have your Airtable API credentials ready? In my case, I have them ready. So I'm going to select yes. This is what's really great about Claude Code in this sense, and especially as a business professional getting into these automations. You can just say, no, I need help. And it's literally going to walk you through step by step how to set up your Airtable credentials. I'm going to say, yes, I have them. And while that's doing it now, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go and create those Airtable credentials because it's probably going to ask for them. I'm going to do something now that you should never do in a live session, and that's generate an API key live. But I'm only going to give it access to this invoicing demo base. So we are a little bit safe here. As I said, if you didn't know how to do this, Claude Code would describe this every step of the way. So let me see Claude Code demo 2. And what I'm going to give here is, this is like Airtable specific, but a lot of APIs, you can stipulate what access you want the API to be able to do. So I'm going to say it should be able to see data and create and edit and delete data. And also it should be able to see the schema. Schema basically means the different field names and columns. Now I'm going to add my specific invoicing demo base. So I'm only giving it access. And that's why I'm a bit comfortable with creating an API key live. Normally, you should definitely not do this. And now it's asking me, please share your Airtable credentials so I can explore your base schema. So I'm going to give it, and it's asking me, it needs the Airtable API key and the base ID. So I can just say API key is this one. And then for my base ID, I can simply here go back. And I'm going to open up that demo base again. And I can just copy the URL, because in the URL, I know that is the table and the app ID that it needs. And I'm just going to say here, Airtable base, and paste that in. Okay, so now what it's doing, it's already gone. And this is what I wanted to point out earlier, the fact that it has this feedback loop and it fixes its own mistakes. What it tried to do, it tried to make an API call here to Airtable, and it failed. It got an error. But what it did within a matter of seconds was read the error that it got and then simply fixed it, made another API call. And now we have here all the data of my Airtable base. It knows every single field, the invoice number, client name, client email, exactly what tables are in there. And now it's able to use that to create its plan. Let me just take a quick look on the chat. Did you create a folder or file before starting? Yes, Fernanda, absolutely. Yes, I did. So I created this folder, this Claude Code Invoicing Agent folder. And now what's interesting here, it's also what I didn't give it at the task at the start. It doesn't know any context about me. So what company name and details should appear on the invoice as the sender? Obviously, it understood from the dummy data that I was using from Dunder Mifflin. So I'm just going to actually suggest this one. Or otherwise, you could say I'll provide my own details. You can even drop files in here that it can access. So you could have already a text file in this folder that says here like invoicing details, and just tell it to, hey, look at the folder that already exists. In my case, I'll use Dunder Mifflin. Does your company have a logo? Again, here I could provide a logo by dropping in a file. For this case of this demo, I'm just going to say no logo needed. Generate invoices without a logo. And all of this right now, it's still, you'll notice here, it hasn't created any files whatsoever. This is still part of it coming up with its plan. This is how much research and in-depth investigation it does to actually come up with this workflow. So Fernanda, step 1, create a folder in Claude to work in. Step 2, open the folder in VS Code. Third step, prompt Claude with the task. Absolutely right. Yeah. All right. So now what's really cool, because we're in plan mode, what Claude Code has actually done, it has come up with an automation plan, invoice automation plan. Remember what I mentioned here in the steps? We tell Claude the task to do it once. Next, we review this plan carefully and give feedback. This is also one of the best places as a business person to learn exactly what it's decided to do. So in this case, I can see that it actually decided to create a Python script. So it's going to be building this in Python. It has the full layout of the project structure, all the file that it's going to create. It's going to create an invoice generator script, a PDF converter script, an Airtable client. This is like super, super useful. It's going to create an invoice template. All of the Airtable API keys are going to be stored in a hidden environment file. And you can like review this now and obviously like ask it further questions. You can say, no, keep planning. Obviously, for this live demo, I'm just going to auto accept, but this is really critical. When it actually comes up with a plan, review this carefully. If you don't understand anything, ask follow-up questions. Spend the majority of your time here in this planning phase, because as soon as you accept this, it's just going to start creating. So I'm going to say yes and auto accept. And now it's going to start implementing the invoice automation system. And what's really cool here is it gives itself a to-do list. These are the tasks that it needs to do, and you'll be able to see this tick off one by one by one. Again, here it's going to be asking for some permissions along the way. So I'm just going to select yes. And what's cool here, now we see these files being created on the left-hand side. Everything it needs to be able to automate this process, it's just going to work through all of those and start creating these files. Take a quick look at the chat. The env file is hidden, I would say, not encrypted, but it is running locally. And like Mark pointed out, so exactly, once you get used to this, you could actually create this env file ahead of time. I just wanted to show you, as a business person who has no idea, I'm just pasting it in the chat. Is this the best practice? Absolutely not. But you could create this env file in your folder ahead of time and drop the API keys in there. And when it asks you, do you already have API keys, you could tell it, yes, I've stored it in this env file. Now it's creating an invoice template. Creating its invoice generation script and its PDF conversion script. You can just see how quickly it runs through all of these. Let me also keep an eye on what we really want at the end here is that it actually runs this, and we should see some invoices added here to Airtable. Okay, all files created. Now let's see how it goes. I'm just going to move this one over here. Just want to. Now it's running the script. It already hit its first error. So it says there's an issue with the Airtable upload. Let me fix the upload method. So it's really like able to read what it does, check the error, and fix itself correctly. And because we took that time in the planning, it's able to give itself some time now to actually execute this. Does Claude Code automatically decide whether to use Python, JavaScript, or other? Yes, Jason, absolutely it does, but you can actually influence this, which I'll show in a second. And it's what someone mentioned before about the Claude MD file. And here we go. We just see this is just updated, not touching anything. This was all done by Claude Code. Here back in Claude Code, it says done. All 3 invoices have been processed. What was done? Generated professional branded HTML invoices, converted each to PDF, uploaded PDF to Airtable. Let's go and take a look at Airtable and see what it created. And here we have obviously a very generic invoice, but I think it still looks very, very professional. We have our company details. We have who we're billing it to. All of this data dynamically pulled in from Airtable. What's obviously very important here is actually check that this is correct. And if it's not, going back to Claude Code and iterating. But in my case, I'm very, very happy with this. Also, I didn't tell it what style to do. If I want a different color, it would just be about prompting that to begin with, right? Or here you could go ahead now, change and actually use a different template. So now if we have a look back at my suggested workflow, let me again just fix my files here a little bit. We've executed the plan. We're testing and iterating. So here it actually managed to nail it the first time. And typically when you spend a lot of time in plan mode, it will nail it the first time. So I'm happy with this. And then what I want to do is create a reusable skill. So what I'm going to do now that I'm happy with it, I'm going to ask it, can you please use your skill creator tool, or skill, sorry, to create a skill called generate invoices, so that I can just call that command next time and the process runs. And the skills we'll touch on in a little bit in a second, but Claude Code, I've installed this skill creator skill that actually tells Claude Code how it should create more skills that it creates. Now it's asking me to, um, here it's doing it. I'm just going to tell it some extra information. This is because obviously I've been using this quite a lot. It's actually saw that there's a conflicting skill that I have access to. I'm just going to say, can you create this skill in this project only? You can remove the others. So we have some questions in the chat. I'll get to those in a second. So he was doing it, taking a little bit longer because it was doing some additional cleanups of other work. So what it's done here in this hidden.claude folder, it creates a skills folder, and within the skills, we have any skills that we add. So in the example that I showed before, this is my work automation folder. I have one skill for newsletter, but you can see you can be building up all of these different workflows. I have a bunch for YouTube, a bunch for writing tutorials, a bunch for events. So really all of your workflow, you can be creating these skills by running the process once, converting it to a skill. And this is also something that you can reuse across different apps. For instance, Codex and OpenClaw also support these skills, which is really, really cool. So what it's done now is it's updated and created this generate invoices skill. What I can do now, if I type / generate invoices, you'll see here it's got this create because that was the one from previously that I deleted, but this generate invoices isn't there yet. And that's because these skills get loaded whenever you start a new Claude Code session. So the first thing I would do is type / new conversation. And now let's see if it's there. So still not, and if not, what I would simply do is close the window and then open it again. So file, open, I'm going to go and open that folder. So that's in my projects, Claude Code Invoicing Agent. I want to open the folder. And now let's see if this has loaded. And here we have the generate invoices / command. So these skills get loaded when you load Claude Code. So sometimes you will need to reboot it. What I'm going to do now is just run this / command, but obviously this one is instructed to look for invoices that are on ready to create. So I just need to mark a few more of these. So let me just mark 5 of these. And then here, imagine it's a month's time and I need to do my next batch of invoicing. I can just open up Claude Code, hit generate invoices, and let's actually switch over here to see it in action. I'll already take a look at the chat for some follow-up questions. And we can see just like that, Claude's already getting to work, updating those first invoices. And this whole thing built in probably what are we at now? Maybe 20 minutes or so. I think it's pretty impressive. All right. So a few questions. Which model does Claude Code use? We can touch on that. The skill creator, tool created, got a bit confused here. So the skill creator skill is something we will import, which I'll show you in a second. We'll do that at the end. Amazing, Ray, that you need this. Would this also work with Google Sheets? Yes, absolutely. 100% this will work with Google Sheets. All you need to do, and here maybe this is another tip, you can go back through past conversations. So your process, Ray, would be instead of the task you're describing is I have an Airtable base, is I have a Google Sheet with invoicing data. Literally just tell Claude Code where your data lives, and then it would be able to get to work. All right. Then with that walkthrough, I know we only have half an hour left. So let's go through. We're going to go through this process now all together live, and we're going to build out. It's also still involving invoicing, but slightly differently. So we want to build out an invoice processor agent. So what I want you all to do, whoever's ready to build along, is go to this link. I'm going to share it here as well in the chat. go9x.me/cc build. And we're going to show another workflow just to get you an idea, and we will go through this process. And let me just open up. What that will do is you will land on the following page here, Claude Code Invoice Processor Agent. And this is what we're going to be building. So Claude Code will read invoice PDFs, extract important data, save it to a CSV file, and organize the processed invoices into a folder by date. What I've prepared for you all is a Google Drive folder that you can simply download. So if you head to this link, if you download this whole file, so if you click here and click download, it will download as a zip file. You can unzip that one, and that's the one that we want to be working with. So maybe I'll wait 1 minute. If you can give me some thumbs up in the chat once you've downloaded this file, this is going to be the folder that we'll be working out of. Yep, so the Notion page, and then in the Notion page, you should have some instructions. So this is the Notion page that you should open up. This is going to lay out all the steps that we'll do. I'll obviously guide you through it, but it's useful to have all the prompts that we'll need. And then here in step 1, download the sample invoices. Then simply open up this link. That should take you to a Google Drive, and then download this folder. Yep, I'll put the link again. I'll even put the whole link, not the short link. Anyone able to download? Are people planning to build along? Just give me a thumbs up if you're planning to build along live, or if you're rather just watching and seeing it in action. Yeah, Ray's ready. Cool. Ian's good to go. Nice one. Keith's ready. Perfect. All right. Nice. Great to see. So since we only have exactly half an hour left, let's get cracking. So as always, the steps, what we're going to do, I've got this folder here on my desktop. I'm going to open this one up. And actually, I'm not going to open it up. I need to go to Visual Studio Code. Now, in this one that I was working before, open up Visual Studio Code. If it's brand new, I'm just going to open up a brand new window. You might see something like this. What you can simply do is click Open, and then go and find that file you just downloaded. I've put it on my desktop. So Invoice Processor Agent, just click the whole folder and then click Open. Once you open that one up, what you should see on the left-hand side is all of the folders that we have. So we have here invoices, we have processed, and we also have next batch. This is what we're going to be doing afterwards to test out if our process works. So this is just for testing purposes. But what we're going to be building is you have a bunch of invoices you receive. We want Claude Code to process them and then move them to the process folder. And it's also going to log all of the details. So if we go back to what we said, the very first thing we want to do is I'm going to open up Claude Code, change it to plan mode. So I'm going to be in plan mode. And what we want to do now is describe the task we want Claude Code to do. And over in that Notion page, the instructions, you will have here the task. So this is just the task. You can copy this one, this prompt, describing Claude the task that we want it to do. So I can paste this one in here. In my invoices folder are 3 new invoices I have received. I would like you to read each invoice and extract the following data points. Then create a CSV called log invoices where you store all of this information. After you extract the information, move the invoice PDFs to the processed folder, but also nest the invoice in a subfolder based on year, month of the invoice date. So if a person was doing this manually, quite a pain and a task that no one really would want to do is opening up a bunch of CSVs, logging the data somewhere, and then moving them between folders. Let's now go and send this off to Claude Code in plan mode. I'm going to send this one off. And maybe you can also just drop a thumbs up in the chat if you're ready and you've sent your prompt off. Okay, so Deb's asking how to get your folders into VS Code. Again, what you can do, there's a few different options, but always what you always be able to do is file and open, or open folder is actually the one you want to do. You can click that and then just click on the folder that you just downloaded. Yep, so Ray, that's a common one. It's asking, this is something from Visual Studio Code, not Claude Code specific. It might ask you, and I think we even have that here in the documentation, yes. So what it might do, it might ask you if you want to install this extension. In my case, I do have this installed. All this allows you to do is actually view the PDFs that you have. So Anthony, interesting that you can't open plan mode. Are you definitely you're in Claude Code at the bottom? We can check that in a second. But Ray, hopefully that answers your question. And obviously, since this one was quite a small task, it didn't actually need to ask any follow-ups. It just went ahead and now created its plan. So what it's going to do, it's going to create the CSVs, create the folder structure, move invoices to process folders, and then verify. Okay, in my case, I've reviewed this. I think I'm pretty happy with it. I'm going to auto accept the plan. And now it's getting to work. We can see it's already got this log invoices CSV. Again, this might also again prompt you in Visual Studio Code if you want to install a CSV viewing extension. So here it's actually come up for me. Do you want to install the recommended Rainbow CSV? I'm just going to leave this for now. And just like that, the task is done once. If we take a look now at our invoices folder, this is completely empty. If we have a look at the processed folder, we have here the 2 invoices, and I'm going to check this one. This is all dummy data, so don't worry. So this is from January 2024. So it's correctly assigned it to the right folder. This is also from January 2024. And then we have this other folder from invoice date Feb 1, 2024. And so we can see it's done all of that. And if we take a look at the log invoices CSV, actually what might even be better, I'm going to take a look in the folder itself. We can see now, because this is really editing stuff on your desktop, we can see here we have this log invoices with all of that data logged to a CSV. So here what we've done now is we've walked Claude through the process once. We're happy with the result. So now what was left to do is actually turn this one into a skill. And in order to be able to, so what you could just go ahead and do is tell it, hey, can you create a skill to do this always? One thing that I would recommend is to actually install the official Anthropic skill creator. So if you take a look at the documentation here, there's this little call out. I'm going to open up this GitHub link. So what Anthropic have done, again, this is official from Anthropic. You do need to be careful when you import skills, because there's a lot of malicious actors out there right now that are getting people to import skills with scripts that can do harm on your computer. So make sure you're only getting these from trusted sources. Anthropic developed Claude Code. It's definitely someone that I can trust. And they have some example skills here. And one of them is this skill creator. And maybe this is a good time to just talk about skills a little bit. All that skills are this markdown file. They always start at the top with a description about when the skill should be used. And then it's literally just a step-by-step process that the agent should follow in creating, in this case, a skill, but for whatever workflow we get it to create. So I've already got this one installed, but in order to install the skill creator tool, what I want you to do is go to /manage plugins. So you can see here, manage plugins. And then I'm actually going to delete these 2 so that we don't have them. Okay, failed to uninstall, that's fine. And I'm going to delete this one so we have it from scratch. And let me restart. So now I'm in the same situation as you. I'm going to go /manage plugins. And on the right-hand side, I'm going to click Marketplaces. And now all I need to do is basically paste in the link that we have here in Notion, which is the link for this repository from Anthropic of the different skills. So I'm just going to copy this one and paste it in here. Whoops. Don't want to like that. I just want the link. And I'm going to click Add. And now when it's added here, we can see it successfully got added. If we now click over to plugins, we can see if I scroll down to the bottom, yours will probably be the only two that you see. We have these two that were just should appear now. So you have document skills and example skills. You can go ahead and install both of these. In my case, I'm just going to show you the example skill, which also includes the skill creation skill. I'm just going to click install. And now you have the option with these skills, where do you want to install them? So where do you want to install them? Do you want to install them for all projects or only this specific project, or install locally only in this repo? I'm going to say for this case, I want to install it in all my projects because I want this skill creator to be available all the time. That was how you saw before when it detected that we had other skills. There's basically different places you can save this. So now with that installed, we do have the example Anthropic agent skills set up. Now what you will need to do is you need to restart to apply the changes. I'm going to restart. And now what I should be able to do, let's have a look. Yeah, so what you can see is the skill creator should be available. Just check that that's working. If it's not, just do what I did before, close Visual Studio Code and open it up. With that one working, what I can simply do is drop in the following prompt. I'm going to ask it, can you create a skill using your skill creator skill called process invoices? That's simple. I could even add a little bit so that you can run this process again on demand. So Jason, I just walked through them there and you can see them. Here is the link that you'll need, but you need to go to manage plugins, then copy this link. It should install them and then select the example skills. All right, so it says done. I've created the process invoice skill. This skill encapsulates the following workflow. So let me, again, what I need to do is actually restart this so that we can test out this skill. So what I want to do now, I'm going to close Visual Studio Code again. Open this one up here, open the folder. Grab that same folder I was working with. So this was the invoice processor agent. And I'm going to start a new conversation. And I just want to check if I do /process. Okay, it looks like it's still not there. Maybe I don't think it comes up on the plugins here, but that's fine. Skill creator. I'm just going to check if it has it. Do you have access to the process invoices skill? Sometimes I do find this a little bit buggy in terms of it reloading the necessary skills. So let's just check. Okay, let me go back to my last conversation. So it says move to install the skill you can. Okay, I'm just actually going to ask it, please install it directly. So it looked like normally it actually does install this straight away. I find it a bit interesting that it asked to install this. I'm going to allow it to install the skill for this project. And so again, here it tried one approach and realized I think this was an error that some others had, but now it was able to fix that. Okay, the process skill is now installed and active. You can see it already showing up in the available skills list. Let's test that out. I wouldn't be surprised if I need to actually restart this. And of course, in this case, I need to restart this again. So I'm going to close Visual Studio Code, open it up, and open up that project. I can actually get it here from my recents. Make this a little bit bigger for everyone to see. And there we have it. Okay, great. We have the processes command. Yeah, so this does take a little bit of perseverance, but really, if it ever comes up with errors, just have a back and forth conversation with Claude Code until you figure it out. Okay, so now we have our processes invoices skill. Obviously, the way that this one is set up is, and we can see it actually here was the skill that it created. And if you ever want to review this, so all skills are markdown files. So Visual Studio Code actually have a markdown viewer. You can press Command Shift V, or I guess Control Shift V if you're on Windows. And here you can see exactly the process it laid out. This is something that you can totally change. It's way better if Claude creates the skill for you, but you also have the option to like go in and adjust these yourself. But I would typically always just use Claude and say, hey, if there's something not right about the skill, tell it what it should do instead and get it to update its own skills. So let's test this one out. What we're going to do now is into the invoice processor agent folder, because the way the skill works is going to look for any invoices inside this invoices folder. Obviously, this is completely blank. Let me grab all of those from the next batch and just drop this inside invoices. And now we can go and test out our new skill that we have. I'm going to start a new conversation and call the process invoices command. And let's see it in action. We should start seeing these files moving in a second. And this is what I mentioned with this like sub agents a little bit, but not entirely. But you can see here it's like separating and reading each document one by one. If you have a large amount of invoices, let's say 50 or 100, it will probably spin off several sub agents and tasks to process these. So it's extracted the data. It's now updating the log invoices. So it's even smart enough to know, hey, I shouldn't create a new one. I'm actually going to update the existing one. Now it's writing to the CSV, and we can see that update already happened there, just like that. Now it's going to process them. I'm going to allow access to the folders that it needs to have access to. And we can see it's going to start moving those invoices to those folders. Pretty cool just how quick it works. All right, and it says it's all done and the invoices are processed. Let's just confirm that one more time by looking at our folder now. We can see all of those are moved out into the relevant subfolders. And if we take a look at the log invoices CSV, you can even see it was smart enough to detect there was some data missing in some of them, and it just leaves this as blank. We could, now that we've run a second batch, go and say, hey, if there's ever the invoice sender address missing, don't log the invoice, rather flag an error, right? So this is just, whenever you run into these, just have a conversation with your Claude bot. Yeah, I understand, Ray. It is quite fast. I tried to cover as much as I could in the time, but what I would really recommend is just like, hopefully this session lines you up to like get started. You have Claude Code extension installed. Take your time and just chat with it. If you don't understand something, ask it. Ask the question. You can always change back here into plan mode, and so that it won't go and update any files. What I want to cover now is a few questions that came up, and also drop in. We've got about a little under 15 minutes left, so drop in any other questions that you have, but a few others that I want to talk on. First of all, on how do you know which model your Claude Code is currently using. So here you can do simply /model and then switch the model. And what's very exciting, since a few hours ago, actually a new Sonnet model 4.6 came out, which is meant to be very good at Claude Code and a little bit cheaper in terms of usage. So I'm very excited to test that one out. But by default, like Opus 4.6 is the one that I'm currently using. I'm going to test out the new Sonnet model, but I'm sticking with Opus for now. The reason why the model is important, and another person asked with regards to context and usage. So a few other very useful commands that we can have here. Yep, Jimmy will absolutely have the recording. No worries about that. It's going to be sent via email tomorrow. So let me show you a few other things. So just show you the slash model. What you can also do is always type in here / cost. Is that the right one actually? No, so here actually wrong. I'm in a bit of open claw mode there. What we can do here is type in account and usage. So if you do /, you see a list of options here, and we have account and usage. So what we have here, the way that Claude works, because you're on different plans, when you're on a team plan or a pro plan or whatever, you have a certain amount of usage. You have a certain amount of usage you can use in 5 hours, and you have a certain amount of usage you can use in a week. And they're also giving you weekly Sonnet usage. So the more you use this, what you'll notice is your usage will fill up. If you're just using your Claude plan, all that will happen is, let's say I have a big session on it. It will basically say, hey, you've used your usage. You need to come back in 3 or 4 hours and start again. How the usage gets consumed really, really fast. And someone mentioned about like the context window, and that's very, very important. I'm actually going to go back to a first chat I have, which had a little bit more back and forth. And here I can type in / context. So let me do the / context command. Or maybe I need to find it from here. I wonder why it's not. I wonder if this is a bug in the current Visual Studio Code version. Let me try type here. I'm just going to close this one. So there's 2 different ways of accessing Claude Code, as I showed you at the start. There's the sidebar chat, but you can also click on the Claude symbol. Let me try and grab this one and see if context works here. Hopefully it does. Yes. No. Okay, I'm not sure if this is a temporary bug. It was working last week. What I'll do to quickly show you this one, I'm actually going to go across to my work automation folder. And let me just open that one up. Work automation. And here I'm actually going to open it up in the terminal. As I said at the start, there's multiple different ways that you can install Claude Code. The VS Code extension, I believe, is the easiest for beginners. But what's important to know, just by installing the VS Code extension doesn't mean you can access it in the terminal. You will need to install this separately, and there's links on the Anthropic website on how to do that. But in my case, since I already have it installed, I can just type Claude. I'm going to use the high effort. Let me close this one for a second and make this a little bit bigger. Then I want to do resume conversation, so we can go to one that maybe had a little bit of context. Okay, I'm going to grab my newsletter one from an hour ago. Okay, so here I have a Claude Code chat. And what I can do is I can pull up this context command. And what this will show me is some details around my current session. So right now in this chat, I've used almost 50,000 tokens out of 200,000 tokens. And we can see how the tokens are split up into different areas. There's like a system prompt, system tools that it has access to. MCP normally takes up quite a large amount of tokens, also skills, but then we have messages. So right now, messages back and forth is the majority of my token consumption. And the more and more I chat back and forth with Claude, the more this context window is going to fill up. Basically, the way you need to think about it is every message I send to Claude, what's actually happening is in the API, you're not just sending that message, you're sending all previous messages so that it can come up with its next response. And as the more context you get it, what's known as like context bloating, a couple of things will happen. A is it gets more expensive, it consumes more usage. And B as well is that the results can get a little bit poorer. So what you can always do is, like, let's say you started with a a process, what you saw me do throughout this session is often I would start a new conversation. So what I can do here is simply type in new conversation, clear the conversation history and free up context. In the extension, it's even easier. And now in this new conversation, if I type in / context, then we see that now we've only used 23K instead of the 47K because we haven't really sent any messages. So keeping an eye on your context window is very, very important. And what I would recommend in this beginner workflow, when you create the task once, after you've created creating the skill is very important that you do that inside the same context window so it knows exactly what it does. After you've created the skill, start a new message, start a new session, test out your skill in a fresh context window, and then you should be good to go. Are there any questions around like context or usage, or was that all pretty clear? Yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to be covering now, Mark. Absolutely. All right. So what Mark's touching on there is this Claude MD file. Let me actually go back to here, the other VS Code one that I was working on. I'm just going to open it again. Open folder. And it was in my desktop. So the invoice processor agent. And we can see the invoice processor agent just has like a skill. Or let me actually do the other one. It might be even better. I'm going to open the folder, projects, my Claude Code invoicing agent. That was the one that connected to Airtable, has a bunch of Python scripts. What I can do here, I want to see if it's, yeah. Let me see if this / command works. Otherwise, I'll just chat with it. But we have this / init. I'm just going to run this one. Okay. Now what Claude is doing is analyzing the code base and it's going to create a Claude MD file. Let me explore the project structure first. So what it does, it goes and reads like, hey, what have we actually built here? What does this project contain? It sees a bunch of Python files. It will probably understand that, hey, this is a Python project, but let's see what it creates. It's actually gone ahead and created that one. So created the Claude MD file. What I can do, you can see here, it's created this Claude MD file. I'm going to open this one up in the Markdown viewer. So Command Shift V or Control Shift V if you're on Windows. So it's a little bit easier to read. What this Markdown does is every time you start Claude Code in this project, this whole Markdown file gets pulled into the context window. It basically, in layman's terms, it reads this before it does anything. So what it will know, it'll have this context that, for instance, here, this file provides a guidance to Claude Code when working with this repository. Invoice generation automation that pulls in data from Airtable, generates invoices, uploads them back to Airtable. It has some dependencies, so it needs to have Python installed. Then it shows, outlines its main files that it needs to have. And this is something that you can totally update. So we had a question before, does Claude Code automatically decide whether to use Python, whether to use JavaScript, which language to use? You can actually go ahead and create a claude.md file and add the line underneath. So I'm going to go in the edit mode and I could do something here like important whenever you are creating scripts in this project, always use Python, something like that, right? And if you create this, you could even have a simple Claude MD file with just that line as you get started. Then it will basically read this first and have that context. Obviously, it's like all prompting. If you don't make it clear enough, you'll probably need to go back and update your instructions. But this Claude MD file is very, very useful to know, because a lot of people complain with Claude Code that, hey, when I start a new session, it doesn't remember anything. Anything that it needs to remember, make sure you put it here in the Claude MD file. As you load a new project, this always has context. Obviously, you don't want to overload it. There's no point making this a 5,000, 10,000 line document because that will just blow your context window. So really, yeah. So Mark's saying I use Claude MD as the Bible for all Claude work. Absolutely. Ray's asking, so skill the specific steps it walks through very precisely. Claude MD creates a file that gives all the context of a conversation so that, for example, completely different Claude account, if I wanted to would give it all the context of the conversation. Yeah, no, I wouldn't say context of the conversation. I would treat it as a context of the project it's currently working in, if that makes sense. Yeah, and Tyler pointed out we also have a user MD file, which is then for all Claude work. So in the case here that you yourself were very committed to one programming language, that would probably be something that you would put in the user MD file. Awesome. Any other questions? Love to have a next level seminar to build apps in the future. Yeah, we had a request from last time, so I think that's one we'll be planning in the future. Perfect. Then, if there's no more questions, hopefully that was useful. As I said, what I really wanted to show you here is how a beginner can get started with it. I really think this Visual Studio Code extension is the most beginner friendly. Also for like typing, you can like paste in a bunch of lines in the terminal that gets a little bit clunky. Also, what I didn't cover, and I think that's probably what we'll cover in the next session when we're building an app and building software. What's really useful is you can attach a file. So if you notice before in the Airtable example, it asked me for a screenshot. If you are using this, and let's say if it like messes up the invoicing here, if like this was like totally disgusting, I could simply like capture a screenshot, copy this one over, drop this into the chat, and it has full ability to read this image. And you can say, hey, I don't like the alignment of X, Y, and Z. Just really like chat to it like you would chat with ChatGPT or Claude, but just understand the powers that it has to actually create the files and be used not only for programming, but for really automating any task. Awesome. Then hopefully all of the Australians out there, I wish you a wonderful day coming up. And all of the rest of the world in the Americas, have a great evening. Hopefully you have a little fun evening experimenting with Claude Code. And hopefully we'll see you in the next session. Perfect. All right. Bye, everyone.